Hi everybody, welcome to the final part of our course. We are in part 3 of the class, which is going to put together a lot of the finishing touches on what we're covering in here. The first way before we actually start applying our model of guidance that we're going to look at it and bring everything together is really looking at resilience and stress in childhood. This is an area that I'm very passionate about. My dissertation, when I completed my doctorate, was focused on principal stress and ways that principals are stressed in schools and in their jobs and their position. I think stress is important to look at for school administrators, for teachers, for children, for everybody, and having an understanding of what stress is and what causes it is really a big idea, and that's going to help you as you learn more about children and child development. Obviously, as we've been saying about everything that involves kids and emotions, children look at things differently. They cope with stress differently. Something that wouldn't faze a child could faze another child completely differently and scar them for the rest of their lives. Understanding your students as individuals and who is sensitive and who's not sensitive is going to be a key to help you understand stress, what stress is, and help you create the appropriate classroom environment for those kids. So, what is stress? Stress is anything that threatens an individual's well-being, and I like that definition because we exist to exist in this world. We want to wake up in the morning, we want to go about our daily business, we want everything to go smoothly, but if something threatens our well-being, the thought of being in a car accident, the thought of dying, the thought of losing our job, that's stress because it's a force coming from somewhere. It's either internal, it's external, it's a force that could actually, threaten our well-being. Different events and different things cause stress in a child's life. Good children are resilient, meaning that stress doesn't faze them and they bounce back from it very quickly. All children handle stress differently, and all children look at resilience differently. So my work for my dissertation was on school principal stress, but you have to understand the framework of where that comes from. Stress research didn't occur until 1956. So while you're watching this, think about that for a second. What happened before 1956? We had World War II, World War I, the Great Depression, the Civil War, the Revolutionary War. So potentially your grandparents and your great-grandparents experienced stress without even having a definition or knowing what stress was. It was just a part of life. How did stress occur and where did we come up with it? Well, as strange and as crazy as this is, Hans Seal was injecting hormones into rats to see how the rats would move around. And he discovered that different hormones caused different reactions, which he termed, it stressed them out. Those patterns were the same patterns that happened to the rats that he was able to make a parallel that said what happened to humans. And he claimed they were alarm reaction, resistance, and eventually exhaustion. So all of these stages are the same as they are for adults, as they are for kids. So we're going to talk about each stage and what your responsibility is as an adult, caregiver, giver, or teacher of these situations. So I really want you to pay attention to these 3 stages because this makes for very, very, very good test questions, and this helps you understand child development better, which, as we've said, a lot of this, you all probably have really strong ideas on what you want to be as a teacher and how you view your teaching career is going to go, but we're really looking a foundational work here to understand this. This is one of the first classes you take, and it's one of the first classes you take for a reason. So alarm reaction is when a child experiences something that they're not expecting to happen. Basically, the child is going to have an emotion, maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 100 different emotions, and they're going to change how they feel when something occurs. So a lot of the time, that's an alarm reaction. The child is stressed out. If you stay in Pennsylvania or Ohio and you end up getting a teaching job, most of your first teaching jobs are going to be incredibly stressful on the kids. The big problem that's going to happen with the children that you're going to learn to experience is your first teaching job is probably going to be a permanent sub job, and it's probably going to be when somebody goes on maternity leave. Now, somebody going on maternity leave is stressful for children because they've had a teacher for an entire semester, and they're going to expect you to be the same as the teacher that you're replacing. What is the common practice in the United States? Well, the teacher takes a sabbatical when they have a child, and then they hire a permanent sub, probably one of you, to come in and take their place for the remainder of the term. That is going to cause a significant alarm reaction in the child because everything that they were used to is going to be just turned upside down automatically. Their world is going to be rocked. So you need to alleviate those challenges. So think for a minute of what you're going to do when that occurs. And as I walk through this makes for an awesome discussion board question related to stress. I really think this is something that I want you to put yourself in that position when you're thinking about ways that stress can occur and what you can do to help children through stressful situations. So resistance. Anybody resists change. So the subject, in our case the child, is going to revert back to a pastime or behavior that they have become familiar with. So you're not Mrs. Smith, and you're not teaching the way that Mrs. Smith taught for 6 months. So that child is going to do what Mrs. Smith would expect, and they're going to hold you accountable to Mrs. Smith's expectations. So what does the teacher do in that situation? They need to comfort them. They need to remind them of the change, and they need to help the situation from becoming a problem. Children handle this very defensively. So you have to balance it, and you have to be comforting, but you still have to keep that authoritative and authoritarian perspective that we talked about earlier in the course. So then finally is when the kid puts their hands up. They're exhausted. They don't care anymore. Something more important is going to happen. The change is there. They have to accept it. You reinforce the change in the behavior, and make sure that the child sees what the new routine is, what the new expectations are, and how they impact their daily activities. My suggestion is at the exhaustion stage is when you give kids rewards, because then the child is going to have had time to adjust, and they're going to be rewarded for being okay with whatever the change was. So, what the work of SEAL did that was even more interesting was it looked for different patterns of stress, but it related them to socioeconomic status, gender, age, race, and found that different contextual factors offer patterns as to whether or not somebody experiences stress. And I'm telling you that probably for a good majority of you, if you get a teaching job and you stay in a competitive market, which our state is a competitive market, if you stay here, your first job is going to be as a permanent sub, filling in for somebody who is on maternity leave. That is going to be the most stressful experience for some of those really, really, really young kids. And you're going to find that gender is a major factor in this, because they're used to, the people that take the sabbaticals mostly are women, because women are the ones that are having children. So a woman is normally going to replace a woman. 95% of all elementary school teachers are women. So a woman will replace a woman, and that's going to be a gender-associated stress factor that you're going to experience in your career, and you need to keep that in mind. So children have different patterns of coping and adjusting to stress, but they experience stress the same way that adults do. So there are patterns that you as the teacher can do to help reduce the amount of stress that a child might experience. So one of the things that I always say, and people don't get this, but you need to take a minute and think about it. Children hate surprises. They do. They do not like to be surprised. It upsets and it rocks their world. It's why we teach in early childhood the importance of routine and consistent and constant reinforcement. Children hate surprises. Children perform better when they have routines in place. Children expect things on their birthday. They do. So it's really not a surprise. But kids don't like surprises. So you have to ask yourself, is it really a surprise? So when routines change, and a child adjusts to a routine quickly, that's called resiliency. You're going to see this in your advocacy classes when you have to take that. That'll come much later in probably your senior year before you student teach. You'll take an advocacy class. When you take play, and play depends on the institution. Some of them have it as a sophomore level class. Some have it as a senior level class. We'll talk about resilience a lot more in those style of classes. You know, some kids weather stress differently than others and aren't devastated by it. Some kids, you know, they can't handle it. So really, it depends on how the family adjusts and how the school adjusts. So we're in early childhood education. You're going to hear names over and over again that you're going to be sick of hearing. If you have not had Ed Psych yet, which is not required by this class, you might not have heard of this dude. This is Abraham Maslow. He basically conditioned the hierarchy of needs. Now, I teach doctoral students, I teach master's level students, and I talk about Maslow in every single class that I teach. So I get to the point where I'm saying this name over and over and over and over again. And for you, this is the first time. Some of you have probably seen Abraham Maslow in the hierarchy of needs. It's one of the most famous theories in all of psychology, and you're going to see it in your education classes, you can see it in your psychology classes. You're going to see this guy a million times from here on out, and you're probably going to see him more than any other theorist because he relates to education and he relates to psychology. The key things that we're going to note on this is that there are 5 levels in his pyramid. The highest needs come into play first, and then you have to make sure that you're meeting the lower needs so that children can achieve the higher needs. Then priorities change. So I show you what they are. It's good to see. This is basically your physiological needs, your safety and security needs, belongingness and affection, self-respect, and self-actualization. I will talk about each one of these. Big idea to take away from this is where we are in today's model of what a school should look like. Legally, all a school is required to provide a kid with is physiological and safety and security. That's it. If a school violates these, that school's out of business, the principal gets fired, the teacher's on the 6 o'clock news, we got problems. Government officials are saying that schools need to provide belongingness and affection and self-respect for kids. It's not legally there yet. We're not kind of at that point yet. The whole point of this class in this textbook is belongingness and affection. That's what we're trying to teach with this course. Making you a stronger teacher and able to work with children better will help you help your class achieve this. But as of today, as of right now when I'm filming this video, these 2 are all that a school is legally mandated to provide you with. And I teach a leadership theory and an organizational behavior theory class to practicing principals and future superintendents. And I always stress this to them that these 3 are great and they're glorious, but your responsibility is these 2. And if you're meeting these 2, you've done your job properly. That being said, though, we're still going to cover all of them in here. So the first one, physiological needs. Everybody needs food, shelter, and water in order to live, survive, and be happy. Schools must provide these above anything else to children. This is why, which you will learn in some of your later education classes, a school day does not exist in the state of Pennsylvania or in the state of Ohio after a certain amount of hours have taken place. It exists as soon as a kid is served lunch because the school has provided shelter, water, and food for the kid for the day. That is, one school day is one lunch session. That's what the kid gets. So federal law says all students must have their physiological needs in order for learning to actually take place. So the school is mandated for this. You as a teacher are mandated for this as well. Next comes safety and security. This is ensuring that the kid is kept safe in school. They have personal security, financial security, health and well-being, safety against accidents from occurring. Schools have to provide this, and everybody deserves this right as adults as well. But schools have to provide the physiological needs first for children. Then you worry about safety and security issues after that. So here is where if I was teaching you, teaching you like I was teaching my doctoral students, we stop and we spend 3 hours talking about belongingness and affection. It is the one that probably matters the most in current contemporary education, because the debate is, should schools provide this or not? And this is another question, once again, that I'll leave on you, and I'm interested in your opinions on this, because it is a big idea here. Schools are required to do safety and security and physiological, but this third one, this belongingness and affectionate, should it be the school's responsibility or not? I don't know. It's really up to debate and contention. The reason that school has been structured the way it has, and that we have middle school and we have teams now, which some of you probably went through, was to provide this belongingness and affectionate. But, you know, should schools be required to do this? I don't know. Legally, they don't have to yet. Are we getting there? Or probably. Maybe by the time you're teachers, they will be. Self-respect is self-esteem. It's making sure that every child feels good about themselves. We would have a long, contentious debate, if this was a face-to-face course, where, you know, should every child get a participation trophy? Or should we have winners, or should we have losers? That comes with self-respect and self-esteem. We're being encouraged now that every child should get a participatory trophy, and they should get, you know, inclusion, and they should get rewards just for being them and existing. The question is, what is this going to lead to when they get to high school, college, and in future development? So, self-respect and self-esteem are great, but you have to question, you know, where this is and the direction that it's supposed to be in and where it's going. So, self-actualization, this is when you know and understand your maximum potential and possibilities. I'm in my mid-30s, and I have not reached self-actualization yet, and I probably won't until I'm in my 40s or 50s, if I ever do. Most people do not meet self-actualization needs. Children in elementary school will not meet this because they don't know their maximum potential and maximum possibilities yet in their life. You have to know who you are, what you are, where you see yourself forever when you hit self-actualization. And don't say right now, even watching this video, that you're at self-actualization, because your needs, your wants, your desires in life are going to change as you get older. Most people don't hit this ever, or they don't hit this until they're, you know, they're close to the end of their lives. So stressors. The two types of stressors are physical and psychological. Physical stressors actually damage kids. Psychological damage their emotions and their mental state. Which one is worse? I don't think one's worse than the other. It really depends on the child, and it depends on the child's expectations. So, what are the physical stressors? These are things like lack of oxygen, not having the correct clothes, loud noises, any type of injuries from physical abuse. Schools have to protect children from physical stressors. One of the things that you're going to see when you take your student teaching, depending on where you're at, what district you're at, your kids that come from troubled homes are going to misbehave the most on Fridays. They're going to be horrible, they're going to be terrors, but it's because of fear of physical stressors, and research will tell you this. They don't want to go home. They don't want the weekend to happen. School is their escape from reality. It's their escape, and you're prohibiting that from occurring. So physical stressors are going to be, that's going to be their biggest escape, being in school. So that's a good thing that you're there as a teacher for them. Psychological stressors are moving, death of a family member, death of a pet, and change in a classroom teacher. Like I said, most of your first jobs, you are going to cause stress for those kids because that classroom teacher is going to change. You're the one that's coming in as a permanent sub, and you're going to cause them psychological stress. You're not going to want to, but you're going to cause it for them because you're upsetting the routine that they've been used to. Moving, strangely enough, research has, there's been a lot of research in early childhood that's tied to this. It's something that maybe some point in my career I'll look at, but children have more trouble with moving than they do with death on average. Moving is a more traumatic event in their life than losing a family member. Children are well conditioned for death, but they're not well conditioned for moving. So if you have children in your schools that are eventually moving or come from a military family, they're going to be jaunting all over the United States, you consider teaching them and helping them with psychological stressors like moving. Death of a family member, death of a pet, it impacts kids in lots of different ways. And that's something that you have to see and you have to gauge as a teacher. So behavior